This is weird. I'm not quite sure what this one's about. Magoo. I'll close that. Magoo. Hashtag Magoo. This one, Lord, pray now with me, with Tucker, as he dreams of Salisbury steaks in heaven, surrounded by frozen mashed potatoes and frozen peas. Lord, the fortune granted to this man, let him use it in thy holy name to destroy the rabble and the riffraff as they try to claim the earth for themselves through democracy, private property rights, and simply regulated capitalism in an American system. Lord, help us. Everybody's praying today. Okay, here we go. This is, I'm not sure what the fuck he's talking about in this one. It says, Tucker, every powerful person in America is talking about this. Every person, every powerful person. Lord, every powerful person is, sorry.
Carlson, now here's something we've noticed.
Hold on. Here's something we've noticed. Okay, so it's a team effort.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Now here's something we've noticed. You may have noticed it too. All of a sudden, pretty much every powerful person in the country is talking about something called democracy.
Oh, fuck.
Democracy! Our sacred democracy! You hear that word everywhere, from the
Yes, but maybe it's an American thing.
Atlantic to NPR to the New Yorker magazine and NBC News in between.
But we're not a democracy. We're a federal republic with the ability to vote person to person, with a democratic system that chooses our representative government. And we have an electoral college for a reason.
Democracy defines the year 2022 the way that Groovy defined 1968. All the cool kids are saying it. Laney has decided her
Yes, it's a colloquialism versus a system of governance.
mission is now to defend democracy. Jim Acosta has a new CNN show in which he uses the word democracy the way some people use prepositions, in every sentence. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, there's a Zoom webinar on democracy, which you're welcome to attend in case you haven't heard enough about it already. Every left-of-center midwit on Twitter will be there. All of them will be fretting about the future of democracy. Pretty amusing.
Why? A lot of people are barking about democracy. This is America, fucko.
It's easy to make fun of an event like that, and of course,
no, it's easy to make fun of your haircut. First of all, Rachel Maddow called, and she says you can use it while she's on break, but she wants it back in April. Also, what's this fucking wisp thing on that side over? Hold on. What's that thing? Is that just a DGAF curl? Just like don't give a fuck?
you have a moral obligation to. David Frum bloviates about democracy, insert joke here. But actually, if we're being honest about it, you should be a little worried about the state of our democracy. How is our democracy doing? Well, let's see. Another way to describe democracy is popular representation. That's
no, not necessarily popular, but a choice of representation by the populace.
When the government does what citizens want it to do, you have a democracy.
No. When they do what they've been elected to do, you have a democracy, even if it's unpopular in certain circumstances, because something might be popular today that actually is ultimately detrimental down the line, or unpopular today that actually might help.
It doesn't. You don't. You no longer have a free country that is ruled.
No, you can just elect new leaders next time if it stays like that.
By its people. So what kind of system do we have?
Well, I don't know.
It's easy to know. You find out what citizens care about, and then you compare those concerns to what the people who run the government say they care about. If you've got a functioning democracy...
Oh, this is going to be like, people care about COVID, and all we're talking about is CRT.
There should be a fairly...
Because you take a bunch of footage of people caring about a minor issue or a side issue of something else and say, look how much it's on the news, and therefore that must be what we're focusing on.
Overlap.
I'm sure he's going to cut to a budget meeting.
In a democratic system, leaders try very hard to speak for their voters. That's the whole point of the government.
Mm-hmm.
So let's apply that test to the United States of America. What do our leaders care about?
What?
We know the answer because they tell us constantly. Our leaders care about equity and climate change. They care about trans rights, police brutality, the deadly insurrection of January 6th, mandatory vaccinations, more H-1B visas for Indian tech workers, and above all, at the moment, defending our closest ally, Ukraine, from Russian aggression.
Well, those are the things that make the news because those are the standout issues, whereas the perfunctory function of the government, like, say, an infrastructure bill, isn't in the news a lot right now because we fucking passed it.
And of course, they care about third-wave academic feminism. That's deeply important to them. Watch is the most famous Democrat in Congress.
Define that, please.
Gives us an impromptu tutorial on Instagram about the connection between
Instagram. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same thing as a congressional committee.
Cosmetics and the patriarchy.
There are studies that show that women who wear makeup or regularly wear like a decent amount of makeup, kind of show up to the office in glam, also make more money. And so at that point...
Yeah, and I'm very disappointed as a man with long hair that if I show up glammed up, I will make less money. Also, men who don't shave in corporate situations, if they don't take a razor to their face every single day, they make less money. Let me explain. Well, I don't have any piano music behind me, but let's be real clear about that. Men who shave and go to work make way more money than men who don't shave when they go to work. So makeup is tough, and I understand it, but men put a razor to their face to make sure they make enough to pay their bills and that of their family.
Stops being, these calculations and decisions stop being about choice, and they start being about
social acceptability,
patriarchy. We live in systems that were largely built for the convenience of men, and oftentimes were designed with the subjugation of women and queer people in mind.
Give that lady an MSNBC show. Sorry, Mika.
Mika doesn't talk like that. It's not even part of the conversation.
I wear makeup because I'm oppressed. Me.
By the way, Tucker Carlson's wearing makeup right now.
Me. Now the short...
Tucker Carlson, if he did his show without wearing makeup, would make less money. A lot less. I mean, he was born rich, so it doesn't matter.
description of that is narcissism, which in the end is the defining concern of our leaders. Above all...
Well, she's not our leader. She's a congressional representative from a single district in New York. She hasn't been elected to a statewide statewide office, much less a national office. I don't know how you choose your leaders. I don't have any. I have representatives that I think are great on different scale levels, like president, senator, congressional candidate, in my area. And I choose based on that, but I don't choose them to be my leaders.
Are interested in themselves. If you work in the media...
And by the way, this is Tucker somehow being upset that he's not the center of this conversation.
Or have multiple college degrees, chances are you're pretty good at making it all about you. You is what you care about most.
Sounds pretty Ayn Randian. I think your staff might have written this backwards.
What does the rest of America care about? Well, once again, we don't have to guess about that. We've got a huge amount of public opinion polling on that subject.
Oh, okay. So polls are legit now. That's good. It's good to know. During Trump, they weren't. They were all bullshit. But now they're legit. But let's see what they say.
Right now from a recent Gallup survey on your screen. At the top of that list, you'll see government incompetence, the economy, the cost of living, and immigration.
Yeah, but that 21% about government and poor leadership, that's not just like Republicans being asked about the Democratic leadership. Hold on one second. Rather long. People need to let me know. Yeah, Robin, I don't know what you're referring to. Sorry. But I'm sorry if you're feeling bad.
Well, that's weird. This looks
what I was saying was government poor leadership. Have you heard Trump talk about rhinos and Republicans? The current Republican leadership in the Senate and the House? How do they talk about it? Do you think this is just Republicans talking about what shit shape the Democrats are in? You think this is a one-way direction because of how we're in? And by the way, most important issue facing it, economic problems, not caused by the Biden administration or caused even by any governmental activity, just the situation we're in. It's a worry.
completely different from the list that Joe Biden might have made.
Why? These would be the primary things he's focused on. The rescue package came first. The infrastructure bill came second. And the biggest things he's passed, it's had to do with this stuff. This was what they focused on getting through. It was dealing with the economic problems and showing good leadership in government.
Equity, climate change, transgenderism.
What the fuck does he watch what Biden talks about every day? And you think you can't talk about some of these issues and still do your regular fucking job? That's all this asshole talks about.
Vaxes, January 6th, Ukraine. Those turn out to be pretty unimportant to most Americans. In fact, some of those issues are at the very bottom of the list.
So, if you asked people about the problem with fentanyl in the country, they'd rank it very high as a problem. But in the do something about it part, they would rank it very low most of the time. Because A, they don't think they can do anything about it, and B, it happens to other people.
But how can that be? If global climate change...
By the way, don't show a picture of him talking. In that little square, Tucker, you're supposed to put the chart that says the Biden administration has mentioned these terms this many times and the economy this many times. But you can't.
Most imminent existential crisis of our time, then why don't voters seem concerned about it? We don't know, but they're definitely not concerned about it.
I don't know. I can't even tell. I don't know.
Instead, Americans are very worried about inflation and crime. As it happens, and this tells you everything, those are the two topics the White House has dismissed recently as irrelevant and dumb.
Really? They said irrelevant and dumb? Crime is dumb. Stop talking about crime. That crime is dumb. I don't like it.
The White House isn't at all worried about inflation and crime.
I'm not worried about inflation and crime. I'm worried about crime inflating. I'm worried about criminal dirigibles. Inflation is dumb. Remember when Jen Psaki said that? It's crazy.
That doesn't sound like democracy.
It also doesn't sound like you're describing reality.
White House press secretary taking some time off from her junior year at Oberlin to speak to her fellow undergrads at something called Pod Save America about how rising crime rates are actually an invention of those racists at Fox News.
Right now, just to give you a sense, so CNN, Pentagon, as many as 8,500 U.S. troops on heightened alert. Okay, true. Same on MSNBC. CNBC is doing their own thing about the market. And then on Fox is Jeanine Pirro talking about soft on crime consequences. I mean, what does that even mean, right? So there's an alternate universe on some coverage. What's scary about it is a lot of people watch that and they think that the president isn't doing anything to address people's safety.
Right. I'm sorry, did you not show the part of the clip where she said crime is dumb? Also, she's just accusing you of bullshitting for political reasons.
What do your kids getting shot have to do with Ukraine? Nothing, Dumbo. You're living in an alternate universe. That's Jen Psaki's position. You'd have to be delusional to think crime was a problem in this country, unless you happen to be in Georgia.
Yeah, we're just focusing on other stuff. We do it nonstop. But
last night around 6:45 p.m. If you were there, you may have seen a man shot to death outside Georgetown Cupcakes. That's just off M Street. And the funny thing is, that's not too far from where Jen Psaki lives. But did Jen Psaki acknowledge that happened? Of course.
No. Why would she wouldn't make it all about herself?
Didn't. Noticing the collapse of your civilization is racist.
Wait, a guy gets shot in front of a donut shop and that's the collapse of our civilization? I'm getting the picture that this is having something to do with race.
When it's happening just down the street. Look away, Jen Psaki, look away! And whatever you do, don't go to Baltimore. Baltimore is a major American city. It's only about 40 miles from where Jen Psaki lives. It's one of the worst places in the Western Hemisphere. It's a little bit of Haiti in the mid-Atlantic.
Ooh. Why would you use Haiti? Why wouldn't you? Why not Yemen, or why not someplace? Why Haiti? What do you think? Why do you think he chose Haiti? What's Haiti like? What do the people from Haiti look like?
Baltimore is exactly what happens when you apply Jen Psaki's ideas to governing.
It is? Was she mayor of? Was Jen Psaki mayor of Baltimore?
Baltimore is a city run by people who fervently believe in the equity agenda and consider gender studies a legitimate academic discipline.
Yeah, that's why the murder rate is up.
Baltimore, pretty much everyone in charge is black, yet it's a matter of religious faith that the main thing holding the city back is white racism. In other words, everybody with power in Baltimore...
By the way, this started with a conversation about democracy.
...agrees with Jen Psaki. So it's an entirely fair question to ask, hey, Jen Psaki, what do you think of Baltimore? How did the city get that way? You claim to care so deeply about African Americans, you never stop talking about that.
She never stops talking about that? I thought your complaint was she was not talking about that.
And yet, here is one of the biggest black majority cities in the United States. Tens of thousands of black people who live in Baltimore are in misery because their kids keep getting murdered. Last year, Baltimore's murder rate was higher than it is in El Salvador and Honduras.
Because their numbers are realistic.
Those are countries the State Department tells us to, quote, avoid due to crime. So it's fair to say things are incredibly violent in Baltimore. They have been for a long time. And yet under Joe Biden...
Under Trump, that was the case as well. Did Trump bring up Baltimore other than to call it a shithole in our own country?
Now, they've gotten even worse in Baltimore. Here's a local news report from today.
The hugging and crying. Sounds of sorrow, outpouring of emotions over the killing of a loved one. 36 homicides in the first month this year in Baltimore City, with only 2 arrests, one for a deadly shooting, the other a stabbing death.
36 murders.
Right. Pretty much on par with Baltimore for the last few years, but you all of a sudden give a fuck, largely because there's a redhead doing the press briefings?
In 31 days. That's the deadliest January in Baltimore in nearly 50 years. And remember, 50 years ago, Baltimore was almost twice as big as it is now. Half the city's left. So Baltimore is far worse off than it has ever been in its history.
How the fuck is... Again, this is the federal government. Baltimore is a city. Is the governor of Maryland not part of this conversation? Is how they handle... I mean, we're going to get to liberal DAs put in by George Soros. Is that where we're going?
And it's not just murders. Drug crimes are up dramatically. You might not know that because they're not being prosecuted anymore.
Well, then how are they crimes?
The local city attorney, a George Soros puppet called Marilyn Mosby,
There we go.
announced she would no longer prosecute low-level drug crimes.
Yeah, like possession for weed.
So arrests plummeted.
Right.
But drug trafficking exploded. Here's what it looks like.
Our cameras caught what appears to be one of those open-air drug deals happening in broad daylight near the Edmondson Village Shopping Center. It's an issue we've been hearing about in neighborhoods citywide throughout the summer. It comes after City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby stopped prosecuting certain drug crimes in the city, including drug possession. A major policy shift that some believe...
Well, that's on the receiving end. There are more customers now because they know they're not going to roll away and get busted. So the dealers were always there. Now they're just doing it more out in the open because the customers don't care about being in the open.
left the issue to only flourish.
Jen Psaki's for that. Black people
Is she?
want laws to be enforced. That's her view.
I'm sorry, Jen Psaki doesn't think that black people want laws enforced. I see.
View of everyone she knows. But what did policies like that do to Baltimore? Well, they turned a once beautiful city into a slum.
Baltimore's been fucked for decades. Now you give a shit? You didn't give a shit during Bush. You didn't give a shit during Bush 1. Didn't give a shit during Reagan. You didn't give a shit during Clinton. You didn't give a shit during Obama. Maybe some.
According to a report by Fox 45 in Baltimore, public school administrators have instructed the police to stop arresting students for committing crimes. And that would include serious offenses from burglary to assault. So the cops did stop arresting kids. The number of students arrested in Baltimore schools has dropped by 98% in the last decade.
So what you're saying is that the federal government should step in between the school boards and the students, that there should be more federal oversight of local school boards and local police departments because the state's autonomy is causing this problem.
That looks good on paper, but it turns out ignoring crime is not the same as stopping crime. Schools in Baltimore got so bad that kids stopped learning anything. Watch this report and ask yourself, what is Baltimore going to look like in 20 years?
In reading, 628 Patterson High School students took the test. 484 of them, or 77%, tested at an elementary school reading level. That includes 71 high school students who are reading at a kindergarten level and 88 students reading at a first grade level. Another 45 are reading at a second grade level.
Welcome to urban Appalachia.
Just 12 students tested at Patterson High School were reading at grade level. That comes out to less than 2%.
Again, how the fuck is this Jen Psaki?
The kids can't read. They're illiterate. What does their future look like? What does Baltimore's future look like? What does the country's future look like? How are they going to participate in our society?
Yeah, all these Baltimoreans spreading out all over the country, illiterate and not knowing in this one particular school.
You wouldn't know any of this was happening by looking at the official graduation numbers because last year Baltimore announced that students will graduate from high school even if they fail their courses. Baltimore's so-called chief academic officer, that would be a Harvard-educated bureaucrat called Joan Dabrowski, announced that this policy was designed to, quote, avoid the punitive approach of failing students. Okay, but somebody is failing students in Baltimore. Somebody, in fact, is failing.
And again, how is this about Jen Psaki and democracy?
In the entire city. And you have to ask yourself, who would that be?
I don't know. I need to ask why you're not doing this about Memphis or Knoxville or parts of Nashville or all of Appalachia or huge chunks of West Virginia. Because there are definitely places through the country. Alabama comes to mind, where this is happening in spades all across there. But something about this town that makes this problem special.
You'd like to ask Jen Psaki, who do you blame for Baltimore? Did white men do this to Baltimore? Was it the patriarchy? Was it structural racism that caused all those murders? Do you agree with Pete Buttigieg that Klansmen urban planners put the highways in the wrong place?
That's in California.
And that's the real problem, racist roads. Or could it be that the real problem with Baltimore is something much more obvious? Could it be that progressive policies designed to, quote, lift up marginalized communities, in the end, destroyed those communities? What's the answer, Jen Psaki?
Why are you asking her?
In a functioning democracy, people like Jen Psaki would have to tell us the answer.
No, she's the spokesperson for the White House.
They would be required to live in Baltimore.
By the way, this whole segment involving democracy in Baltimore and Jen Psaki all comes from the fact that she, during that roundtable video call she was on, pointed out that Fox News is all in on crime reporting locally to dismiss all the functioning good things the federal government is doing while ignoring the fact that most of these problems are on a federal or on a state and local level.
They learned something, just as the people who wrecked Afghanistan probably ought to explain what they've learned before they move on to Ukraine and Russia.
Sorry, they wrecked Afghanistan? They wrecked Afghanistan. I mean, materially, there's stronger infrastructure and the ability to carry out a good government in Afghanistan more so than there was before the Afghanistan war. The difference is who takes it over. That's not something we can control, nor would we want to.
A requirement. And in fact, honestly, you'd think that people like this would welcome a chance to reflect on what they've done. They have screwed up very badly. They've hurt the weakest among us. For Christians, that's the greatest sin. But these people aren't Christians. They worship only themselves.
You're not a Christian.
So they turn away. You can bet money that Jen Psaki rarely goes to Baltimore. It's just too depressing.
You can bet money that Tucker Carlson never goes to Baltimore.
Raises too many questions. Instead, Jen
Tucker Carlson limos to and from work.
Psaki and her friends are planning their fun little summer trips to Bozeman or Martha's Vineyard or East Hampton or some other remote and blindingly white outpost of privilege. Funny how that works. You
Funny how you can assert that without anything.
Stuff and then you ignore it. This allows you to wreck more stuff without feeling guilty. That's modern progressivism distilled to 18 words. Hey, Sean Hannity.
18 words. 18. Am I thinking of the 14 words? Is that where he went? Hold on. Eighteen words. That's why I remember it. Hold on. Get out of here. Close. Look at the quit. I don't want to look at that. I want the book cover. There you go. 18 words. Here we go. Fellowship, regeneration, faith, devil, death, mediator, election, grace, reconciliation, justification, Lord, mortification, sanctification, holiness, world, sin, scripture, and revelation. 18 words, the most important words you will ever know. That's where I thought that 18 words sounded familiar. If the modern world can be characterized by one thing, it is probably the enormous increase in the number of words around, but that increase has also been accompanied by a seemingly corresponding decrease in understanding. Jay Packer is a masterful wordsmith. He's gifted with the ability to a fascinating, right, and life-changing one. It's a doctrinal Solomon, meditating debates, and everything from Bible translation, the free-flowing Pentecostal. Yeah, it's a Christian reference. There you go.